Hello. So hopefully you'll be able to hear the sound of this. It's pretty windy up here. We're up on the Sugarloaf, which is just behind me here. On the walk, you can see part of the tree tread stream tributary would come off this mountain here and would travel down all along here, along the path, and also cutting across there. So what's of interest here in terms of what we're trying to achieve? So for carbon security and climate security and biodiverse, to stop biodiverse collapse, one has to start looking at the whole landscape of each town and interconnected towns as one system. So here we can see Glen the Downs. Of course the road should have gone that way all those years ago through this land, but for ridiculous reasons it didn't, and they cut through the original, one of the very few remaining oak forests of Ireland. So the path is here. Our aim is that you want to grow existing forests, following Paul Stamets' advice on how to develop mycelium networks, and also to create security for biodiversity. There's no point in creating a new forest if you already have one that you can grow, because all the wildlife living in that forest can then just travel into the new one. The bees can travel in, the insects, the birds, etc., and it follows from there. So the idea is that the hill here on the west, the land on this bank here would be purchased. It already looks like some of that is gorse and brush and heather, and this should be planted into with oak and the native species traveling across. There is a place for heather, and that's here, but although you'll see that unusually we have what looks like the Christmas tree is seeding here by itself. Now I don't know if that's by birds or by wind, but you know, that should really be Scots pine. It shouldn't be this type of tree. So we should look at that. People should come up and plant Scots pine throughout here to be with our heather and I think it's called the bilberry bush here, and the other species that are here, the hawkbit, the cat's ear, you know. Anyway, so purchase the land here. On this side we have a conifer plantation on the east side. When this is ready to be harvested, that should be taken out and then planted with your native species. The same goes for the farm belt here, and I fully respect farmers. If they want to continue farming, you know, farm away, but if you want to sell, you should get a fair price for your land, and that should be converted all to forest. So you're creating one large forest belt. The tree trout stream travels underneath the highway, so unfortunately they didn't create a correct overhang for it. They just put a pipe in, which should never happen. So once again, it's another error made against nature, and these things going forward need to be corrected. We can't retrofit a proper overhang for the stream anymore. Unfortunately, it's a pipe. The tree trout stream travels from this mountain down, and the Sugarloaf of course contributes to it as well. You can see the valley that's forming over here, and all the farmers side by side that would have farmed this for the past few hundred years. All of these farmers have to come on board as part of the deal. They should receive complete fair compensation for the section of the riparian way which they contribute. So if they're giving 20 meters either side, they're paid for that 20 meters, or they're paid to manage it. So it's either purchased or they're paid to manage, and they would have right away over that stream with the correct kind of bridge for cattle, etc. But in general, you want to avoid cattle from disturbing or releasing any excrement into the water, because that contaminates it. And of course, there should be no chemical runoff or fertilizer runoff. So some of the stream, which you can see there, some of it has been planted on, unfortunately, with conifer. And in 1940, 50, 60, 70, 80, they planted right up to the edge of the river. Now, thankfully, the Forest Service on Department of Forestry, that's now changed. You have to be 10 meters in. Not only that, that 10 meters is allowed to rewild itself. And they also encourage that the next 10 meters is native species. So 20 meters potentially can be that riparian way, and that's really the way to go. We should even aim for 30. What does this do? You know, how does it help our children and our wildlife in equal measure? Without our wildlife, our children don't have a future, and the wildlife doesn't exist without canopy cover. You know, it's that simple. If we don't have continued canopy cover of a certain level in Ireland, it's just not going to work. So at the moment we have 5% native species, all fragmented, and 6% quilcha. So if we stand up here and take here as an example, and we look at the forests around the hill here, you'll see how much is plantation forest. So this is plantation here, plantation here, plantation, plantation. From what I can see, maybe a little bit of native. Plantation forest. Over here, plantation. Over there does look like native and conifer. Let's just take a look at that. It's a mixture of native on this side and conifer on this side here. That could be a bit of a mix. And of course the flat area there is all conifer. Here you have bog and heather. And then you have your dairy farming. So you have your cow farming here, cattle farming and dairy, sheep. There's sheep on the hills here. The upper area here is a mixture of sheep and mostly, it looks like mostly grazing. The same for here, because to bring your machinery on that is a little bit dangerous because of the gradient on it. You know, the whole upland region in general should be, the whole upland region in general should be forested sections. And the reason for that is, in terms of water runoff, there's a very clear reason. If your field looks like that, what happens to water? It just flies off the hill into your stream. There's very little water security as you go down into our towns. Now the tree tread stream is it's a small stream, it's nothing major. But for your rivers, your major rivers in Ireland, this is exactly what's happening in all of them. The upper areas have no water catchment. All the catchment's being drained to run off really quickly through the land. And all along they're planted conifer, which are acidifying the water even further. So I'll sit back down. So the ultimate aim of what we're trying to achieve with the tree tread stream would be to set a best practice example of what can be done with a small stream going through a number of towns, and all those towns working together to create something really beautiful that creates this green corridor for their wildlife, for their insects, for their birds, and all the species that follow that, you know, your frogs, your newts, etc. Farmers are fully brought along with this. They do not lose money. They are compensated for any land. So if we remove a portion of the land that initially would have had, let's say, 20 head of cattle on it, and then they lose a portion for the riparian way, those 3 head of cattle per year that they normally would have there, they're paid fully for that. There's no loss to the farmer. And it's a single project scheme, so every farmer is contacted at the same time, every farmer is brought on board. And if it has to be done over time because some farmers resist and don't want to, well, okay, you get on board who you can, but you must insist that no further chemical or runoff goes into the stream, though. That would have to be, you know, really strongly enforced. All this is doable. There's no reason that here the Glen of the Downs cannot be expanded this way and this way. The farmers are paid fairly for their land, like especially that first square field here. You know, this one here, would be really important. The ones running along the top of the hill here, really, really important to it. And anywhere that the stream is pinched earlier on, also really important. Even though the stream has been cut here at the the Glen of the Downs highway there, it doesn't mean that the biodiverse belt here shouldn't be made into a gem. It should, you know. We need to be doing everything we can to help nature, everything. And I don't think for one second our farmers don't want that, you know. There are certain areas I would say they're kind of dead zones and they don't contribute that much. So let's say the flatter area, like all areas do have runoff, but let's say the flatter areas over here, which have a conifer belt beside it, they've been farmed for a very long time, they've received fungicides, herbicides, pesticides on them. There's no hedgerow, like the hedgerow is minimal. That area there you can build houses on, you can continue to farm as you're doing and hopefully get better and better in terms of the types of chemicals used, but continue farming. But the areas here with the gradient in them that are actually really quite hard to farm, and the gradient here, that should all be rewilded. This one here, all of those, you say to the farmer, look, let's do a deal, let's just do continuous forest cover, you know, rather than putting sheep on it, let's do continuous forest cover. I'll deal with that in another post. So thank you.